Many of the contributions and heroic acts of Americans' black military veterans have been underreported throughout our nation's history. Dating back to the 1770s, black soldiers have played an integral part in the advancement and progress of the U.S. military and its role defending the American way of life. Historians say that more than 5,000 black patriots fought in the Revolutionary War, helping the nation gain independence. But questions still remain about opportunities for black and brown people to enlist and serve, and what some say is a legacy of inequality within the ranks. So for more on this, we want to bring in U.S. Army veteran and co-founder and executive director of the Black Veterans Project, Richard Brookshire. Thank you so much for joining us. The Black Veterans Project is very interesting. You have sort of an agenda that is threefold. So I have a two-part question for you. Why did you think the Black Veterans Project was a necessary thing to create? And, talk about some of the problems that you had been identifying and that you hope to solve.
Yeah, thanks for having me first. The Black Veterans Project was born out of a recognition that there was a lack of a digital kind of conversation, and we know how important the internet is in this age, around racial justice in the military. Broadly, a conversation about racial justice and inequity in the military. And so we wanted to start to bridge more of a national dialogue about that. We wanted to be an organization that could provide more in-depth research to push for, and really be advocates for an accountability organization for the military to ensure that it was doing its due diligence, not only about correcting, and redressing the long harms that have been made against Black veterans, but ensuring that diversity and equity in the ranks as it stands now, white nationalism in the ranks as it stands now, was addressed.
Yeah, when I looked at you, it's funny that you would talk about sort of the online dialogue because the website's really good. Like, it really sort of draws you in. It's easy reading, and you have these statistics that are just so jarring. And you can see that the focus is about the future of African Americans in the military, the present, but also the past. And what we have seen about the past is a diminishing of the accomplishments of African American soldiers. Just recently we talked about retired Colonel Paris Davis, whose nomination for a Medal of Honor was sort of lost. And they had to sort of dig it up. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that. The way in which African American accomplishments have been either in error or by design diminished and erased. And the impact that it has not just on Black soldiers, but also on America and how we feel about the contributions of African Americans.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, the military doesn't lose things on purpose. They do. They lose things on purpose, rather. And so the fact that someone like Paris and his contributions weren't recognized isn't a surprise. And there's so many like him. Of the 3,500 enlisted personnel that have been honored with the distinction of the Medal of Honor, only less than 90 have been Black, which is, we know, an alarming disparity. And so, yes, I think that we have to be the keepers of our own legacy. It's been very clear for very, very long that without us doing the due diligence to ensure that legacy is kept, without Black veterans being front and center in the conversation about their service, their experiences, that history will be lost. So we really take that we take that very seriously at the Black Veterans Project, and we're just starting. We're a baby org. We've kind of developed a large footprint in a very short amount of time, but the work is certainly just beginning. And thank you for the compliments on our website. I think our long-term goal is to really create a digital archive, a kind of a digital museum of sorts, where you can come and learn not only just about the historical accomplishments of Black vets, kind of tie the present day manifestations of racial inequity, because it certainly still does exist, to this longer legacy. And I think that's really important for Americans of all backgrounds to understand.
So let's talk about the present. You wrote an op-ed for The Root. It was titled, Black Vets Weren't Surprised Military Members Stormed the Capitol. Now they want the Department of Defense to root out far-right extremism in its ranks. And, you describe being stationed in Germany and, seeing service members celebrate the Nazi history in Germany. This is a history that even Germans are trying to acknowledge, but also and make sure that they put it in its place. It is not a reason to celebrate for Germans, but you saw fellow Americans doing that. What needs to happen, and what has been happening? As I was reading your op-ed, I kept on thinking to myself, but this is bad for the military. This is bad for cohesiveness. This is bad for the brotherhood. Why wouldn't leadership have addressed this a long time ago? What's your take on why the ball has been dropped for so long?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to note that America has a long history of racism. We don't have to point to Nazi Germany as an example.
Yeah.
And though there were plenty of troops that I saw kind of lifting up white nationalism, even Nazi culture, or just having a general fascination with Hitler. Unfortunately, I think that we have to recognize that that even Germany, even the Nazis, they modeled their laws around American race law, right? And so there's an international kind of history here. And so insofar as what should be done about that, certainly the military has the provisions in place to address this. They've long, over the course of the last few decades, been instituting different task force, been appointing personnel, been kind of paying lip service to this issue. And I think it's just a lack of real courage, right, to address this issue more head on. And we know that the military can do it. I think one thing that was a fascinating point that Don Christensen of Protect Our Defenders made was that we've seen the military tackle something like gays being able to serve openly, right? And the witch hunt that was Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and the ruining of careers around Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So we know they have the capacity. It's a lack of wanting to dedicate resources. It's a lack of real courage in wanting to confront the fact that it's so insidious. The fact that 1 in 5 insurrectionists on January 6th were veterans, military personnel, right? That 1 in 3 Black service members writ large, actually, say that they've seen white nationalism in the ranks. So this isn't a minor issue. And even the Secretary of Defense on Sunday, in a conversation with journalists, saying that he was actually surprised by the extent of the problem, but then kind of doubling down on the fact that it wasn't as pervasive as some might think, but it is, right? And even the data that we have is somewhat short, right? It's, we pushed last year for the DoD to release racial bias survey data that they've been long keeping secret, right? That they've been long hiding from public view. And they only released 1 year of that data. And in that, almost over 40% of Black folk who experienced discrimination said that they had fear of reporting for fears of retribution. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. They have to ask more pointed questions. They have to organize resources. They have to actually enforce the policies that they already have in place. They can't merely continue down the task force rabbit hole. They can't merely just pay lip service by appointing personnel. Certainly those things are important, but the military's had these policies in place, and it's really a lack of willpower for enforcement.
So listen, I said brotherhood, I should say brother and sisterhood. And just finally, looking to the future, retired Army General Lloyd Austin has made history now, becoming the first African-American to become Secretary of Defense. Sometimes changing leadership makes a huge difference. Sometimes it's a challenge because you have to change the culture. What is your hope for him?
I'm hoping, I think, I recognize that General Lloyd Austin is just one man, right? We've had a Black commander-in-chief and this issue persisted, and I served for 8 years under a Black commander-in-chief, and that's when I was seeing all the different things that I was seeing in service. I think we have a Secretary of Defense that recognizes the issue, that isn't shying away from the issue, and that's certainly a starting point. His 60-day kind of lockdown on the military to have really open discourse about this issue is certainly, a necessary first step. The appointing of Bishop Garrison to kind of lead D&I efforts in the military, to be a point person for white nationalism and extremism. These are all steps in the right direction. But I think there just has to be honest reckoning, not only with the history, but with the present day manifestations of racism, right? And shifting culture. And so as we look to the future, I think in keeping pace with our evolution of thought in our society about civil and human rights, most Americans don't know that the Civil Rights Act has never applied to the military. That Title VII protections that have been so instrumental in guaranteeing equity in our society actually don't apply to the military. It's been its own self-governing apparatus for far too long. And something like Ferris Doctrine being in place, which bars service members from being able to levy suit against the military. All these things collectively create the conditions where there is no accountability. And so these things must change. The service members shouldn't have to forfeit their civil rights to change, and there should be protection, bare minimum protections, and real due diligence when it comes to taking their grievances seriously.
Black Veterans Project, I encourage people to head to that website. You will come away smarter. Richard Brookshire, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a lot more news coming up after the break. You are streaming CBSN AM.